Hi, first graders. It's Mrs. Wright coming to you with our 16th president, Abraham Lincoln. And I found this book and I thought I'd share it with you about him. And then I will post the page for your president's book. Here's the story. It's called Looking at Lincoln by Maria Kalman. So here's the story. One day, while walking through the park, on my way to breakfast, I saw a very tall man. He reminded me of someone, but I could not think who. At the coffee shop, I ordered pancakes. They were delicious. And we paid with a Lincoln and 2 Washingtons. And then I remembered the man I had seen looked exactly like Abraham Lincoln. Let's go back and see who that man was. There he is, right there. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president of the United States. Who was he? I went to the library and found out. Abraham Lincoln was such an amazing man that there are over 16,000 books written about him. I wanted to read them all, but I got lost in the photos of his unusual face. I stared at one. I could look at him forever. He was born in a small log cabin in Kentucky on February 12, 1809. The family was poor. Abe was a dreamer. He did not like to do chores. He loved to read. He was lucky. His stepmother loved him like crazy, and he adored her. She looked so stern, but she let him dream and read as much as he wanted. He went to school for only 1 year, but he was curious and taught himself many things. They had hardly any supplies, and of course, no electricity. Abraham spent many hours reading by the fire's glow. One day he was kicked in the head by a mule. He slept for 2 days. Then he woke up and grew up and decided to be a lawyer. He did like to argue. He lived in Springfield, Illinois, and got a reputation as a smart and honest man. They called him Honest Abe. He had a family that he loved very much. His wife, Mary, who was very short, and 4 sons. They laughed and had lots of friends and even ran around a little wild. I wonder if Mary and Abraham had nicknames for each other. Did she call him Linky? Did he call her Little Poompy? Maybe. And Abe worked hard and became interested in the government. He decided he would run for president. And on March 4th, 1861, he was inaugurated President of the United States. On the day he was elected, I bet Mary made him his favorite vanilla cake. But maybe he forgot to eat his slice. He was often too busy thinking to eat. Lincoln wore a very tall hat. With his hat on, he was over 7 feet tall. Actually, he was 7 feet tall. He wrote many notes and stuffed them inside his hat. What was he thinking about? Good question. What did he love? He loved his dog Fido. I think Fido was cross-eyed. He loved apples, coxes, orange pippins, white pippins, wine sap, and Benoni. He always had an apple on his desk. Who's this? He loved music. He loved Mozart, especially his opera, The Magic Flute. But mostly, he loved people. His family, of course, but all people. And he wanted them to live well. He loved justice and truth. The country was in trouble and headed for war. After hundreds of years of slavery, people were saying enough. There were courageous people who fought for liberty, like Sojourner Truth. In your extra time, you should Google her and learn about her. And Frederick Douglass, who had been a slave until he ran away to the North. Both of them met with Lincoln and spoke of the plight of slavery. That means how bad slavery was. We've talked about slavery and we know how bad it was, right, first graders? Lincoln hated slavery and wrote to a friend, if slavery is not wrong, nothing is wrong. So do you remember we talked about with slavery? That was when Africans were taken from their homes and sold to other people, and they had to work in the cotton fields and tobacco fields, and they weren't paid any money. It was really awful work. During his presidency, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, the first official step toward freeing millions of slaves. It was a difficult time to be president. The southern states, the Confederacy, wanted their own country where slavery was allowed. Lincoln said, no, we must stay one country. The northern states, the Union, believed that slavery should be abolished. That means gotten rid of. And so they went to war. This was the Civil War. In a museum, I saw the uniform of one of the first soldiers killed in the Civil War. Here is a bullet hole at the point of his heart. There were 14 brass buttons on the front of his tunic. One was shot away. 13 brass buttons remain. The soldier's name was Elmer Abraham Ellsworth. Terrible things happen in war. The Civil War ground on. Lincoln went to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, the site of a big battle. Thousands of soldiers were buried there, many with just a number on their grave. On that sad land, Lincoln gave one of history's greatest speeches, the Gettysburg Address. It was short, only 272 words, ending with government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. The war finally ended in 1865. Almost 1 million people had been killed or wounded. The North had won. The people had suffered greatly, but now it was time to rejoice and start to rebuild the country, with Lincoln heading the way. But it was not to be. After the agony of the war, Lincoln wanted to lighten the mood. He took his wife to see a funny play. During the play, he was shot, murdered by a wretched man who did not want slavery to end. Lincoln had been rocking in his chair. People carried him across the street to the home of a friend. He died the next morning, April 15th, 1865. He was 56 years old. So young. The news spread. People across the land wept with grief for their fallen leader. But a great man is never really gone. Abraham Lincoln will live forever, and if you go to Washington, D.C. in the spring, you can walk through the cherry blossoms and visit him. At his memorial, you can read the words he wrote near the end of the war, with malice toward none, with charity for all, and you can look into his beautiful eyes. Just look. This is the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Dr. Martin Luther King stood in front of this statue and faced out when he gave his very famous speech, the I Have a Dream speech. Here's some notes about his life. This is a really good book. It's called Looking Looking at Lincoln. I hope you enjoyed it.